up, and welcome to the next edition of Miami Market Sense Making. I'm Jake Fletcher, right here in Miami, Florida. Fletcher Group, Remax Advance Realty, bringing you guys a bi-weekly market update. And it is December 2019. We're getting ready for 2020. Going to be interesting to see the new census information that will be coming out next year. And we'll have a lot of fun when that happens. But for now, I want to talk about a little more of a broad understanding of how healthy is the economy of Miami-Dade, and how in return, or subsequently, how healthy is the real estate market. So basically, your health of an economy in any area, which, you know, Miami-Dade is a indicator county. Miami is an indicator city as to the health of the nation and the nation's economy overall. But the health of any one particular area nowadays is very hyper-local, right? So you're not just talking about Miami-Dade or the city of Miami. You're talking about all the sub-neighborhoods, the, Coral Gables, Kendall, Coconut Grove, West Miami, Doral, Allapattah, North Miami Beach, South Beach, all these different areas, these neighborhoods, right? So that's important to keep in mind. And what you might see as a trend for the city or the county overall might not be replicated in one of those smaller neighborhoods or municipalities. So that being said, I want to talk about first establish the idea that the net migration patterns are what is going to be one of the main factors as to the health and the growth of an economy. When there's more people moving out than there are people moving in, that's a negative net migration pattern. When there's more people moving in than there is moving out, that's a positive net migration pattern. So these migration patterns are basically affected by three different things. You have job growth, you have the cost of living, and you have weather. All right. So we won't really be talking about weather a lot because everybody knows that Miami has some of the best weather in the country. All you have to do is turn on the Weather Channel when it's, cold outside like it is right now in most of the country. And here in Miami, we have a cold front coming through, and it's the coldest it's been all year. It's about 60 something degrees outside. It's a high of 70 today. So we won't really be talking about weather, but we'll be talking about job growth and cost of living. Now, of course, the initial premise of that migration pattern is the population growth. So what is the population growth of Miami-Dade? Let's get that straight from the get-go here. The population growth of Miami-Dade is an average of a 1% growth per year over the last 10 years. Before that, from 2000 to now, it's been about 20% total. So that 1% has been more or less consistent, give or take a little bit each year. But over the last 19 years, there's been about 20% growth. Okay. Before 2000, it was actually a greater number. It was higher than 1% per year by a lot. Some of the highest growth percentage decades that we saw were in the 50s and the 60s, where there was like 88% growth during those decades. Obviously, the Cuban Mariel and other factors led to that happening. That was one of the main factors, seeing as how about 2/3 of Miami-Dade are of Latin or Hispanic heritage, and about 34% of those 34% of the population is Cuban. So huge amount of increase in the population from that back in that time. Now, the population nowadays over the last 20 years, like I said, about 1% per year. But let's talk about the age demographics, because that matters too, right? People think Florida is like a retirement state. So if everybody is 65 and over, how many of them are going to be future home buyers, right? Maybe they're just buying their one home and that's it. Actually, we look at this chart that's coming from U.S. Census Bureau information, and we see that from 25 years to 34 years old was the greatest population change. That was about 42% increased over between 2008 to 2017. So a 42% increase in that age bracket, which is pretty incredible. Now, 35 to 44, there was a 4.7% increase, and 45 to 54, there was a 17% increase. So those are from 25 to 54. Those are your majority of your current home buyers and your future home buyers. So that's a pretty important statistic to keep in mind. Okay, so as far as job growth, which is one of our three main important factors as to that net migration pattern. Remember, we said job growth, cost of living, and weather. We're not talking about weather. So job growth, Miami-Dade, Miami area employment grew 2% year over year from September 2018 to 2019, which is more than the national average of 1.4%. So there's a greater percentage change over the last year from September 2018 to 2019. There's a greater percentage change in job growth, which was 2% versus 1.4% nationally. Okay, so that's pretty important to note as well. Not only is our population growing, but our job growth is also expanding at a greater percentage, a greater rate than the national average. Okay, now interesting to note, the industries that are most prevalent in that growth, that make up the majority of that growth, are education and health services, which was a 4.6% growth versus 2.6% nationally. Also, professional and business services, which was a 3.9% growth versus 2.1% nationally. And construction, which was 3.6% versus 2.1% nationally. Okay, so pretty interesting information there. Education and health, professional and business services, and construction. Note that construction is one of them. So when we're thinking about real estate, keep that in mind. Okay, now employment in the 12 largest metropolitan areas, Miami actually ranks number 5 in employment growth in the entire U.S. Number 1 is Dallas. Number 2 was Houston. 3 was San Francisco. Number 4 was Phoenix. And number 5, good old Miami. So that's a very important thing to note. Out of all the metropolitan areas, Miami was number 5 in that job growth. Okay, and again, that's that 2% growth year over year from September 2018 to this year, 2018 from 2019 September. Okay, so pretty interesting information. Now, that's job growth. Let's talk about cost of living. So this is where we have a little bit of a mixed bag, okay? Because Miami isn't necessarily the most expensive metropolitan area to live in, although it is pretty expensive, and there are some aspects of Miami life that are more expensive than other metropolitan areas. So cost of living in Miami-Dade County, based on the average indices, the U.S. average being 100, we're going to compare what Miami is compared to that 100, okay? So if it's below 100, that means it's cheaper. Above 100, it's more expensive. So overall, Miami ranks as a 118.9, okay? So that's definitely more expensive cost of living wise to the rest of the U.S. Florida is 102.8, so Miami-Dade is even more expensive than the rest of Florida at large. Now, as far as individual expenses, groceries are ranked a 107.7. Health is a 98.8, so it's actually cheaper here than the rest of the U.S. for health. Housing, 130.2, okay? So a good bit more expensive, and that's reflected in the median home cost here in Miami-Dade, which is $301,000 versus the national average of $231,000, and the Florida average is $237,000. So pretty significant increase there. Utilities are 96.2 versus 100 of the national average, so it's cheaper for utilities here. Transportation is outrageous. We definitely have to work on our transportation here in Miami-Dade. It gets a 146.6, okay? And then miscellaneous is 100.7, which is, pretty close. So The cost of living in Miami-Dade were 118.9 overall. Now, this is where things get extra hairy, okay? So this is counties with populations greater than 65,000 people ranked by the rate of cost burden for owner households with a mortgage. So people who are still paying a mortgage, who are paying more than 30% for housing. Miami-Dade ranks 812 out of 818 counties. So not good. People in Miami-Dade are paying a greater percentage of their household income to pay off their mortgages, and we rank 812 out of 818. It's not any better for renters. Same thing for renters. People who are paying more than 30% for housing, we rank 814 out of 819. So not so fantastic there. It kind of bears out the idea that perhaps we may see not necessarily a drop in cost of or prices of housing and prices of rent, but we're probably going to see a leveling out of that over the next year, 2 years, maybe more. Okay, so let's put some context into the real estate side of things. So here we're looking at a time trend comparison. We have a bar chart and a line chart to show the difference. So month supply of inventory, this goes all the way back to the beginning of 2009, right after the crash. The crash was still really kind of going on, right? And we see months of supply of inventory was through the roof. Average sale price actually goes back to 2008. We see it was very, very high, and then it just tanked, right? A lot of places almost halved their value, like 3/5 of their value. And then we look at median days between original list date and contract date. That's also known as days on the market. We can also see that goes back to 2008, and it also dropped a decent amount there. So why is that? Why did that happen in 2008? Well, once things lost their value, once things dipped in price, a lot of cash buyers came in and started buying things cash. So the days on market were less because people were snagging up deals, right? Which now they have a tremendous amount of equity on. So not everybody loses when the market crashes. Side note, make sure you're somebody who wins next time the market dips a little bit, okay? So, or tanks. So months supply of inventory, if we keep looking at it, it starts to level out 2013. That's when generally we say the market kind of recovered and started leveling out and started to return, okay? So we see a gradual increase month supply of inventory. So what that means, if you're not familiar, is how many months it would take to sell everything on the market. If nothing else new came on the market, how long would it take, right? So we see that kind of gradually increasing until 2019. And then we've started to see month supply of inventory go down a little bit, which is a good sign, right? It means basically healthy market activity. Average sale price, we also see that it's kind of steadily increasing from that 2013 point. And then also 2019, kind of a few months into it, we started to see the average sale price just retrace just a little bit, right? Median days between original list to contract date, days on the market, we've seen a pretty steady rate, okay? So we saw kind of right there in 2013, once values of homes started picking up again, the days on the market kind of started rising a little bit. There was less people snagging cash deals, and we actually see the cash deals start to decrease around that time too, and took a big dip in 2016 when FIRPTA came in action, which is the Foreign Investors Real Property Tax Act, where foreign people who were from outside of the U.S. buying properties in the U.S. had to pay more taxes, had to be, there was more scrutiny over where the money was coming from, if it was, sketchy or not. So if we look at the line chart of these things, we see the month supply of inventory, we can really start to see it leveling off in 2019. So remember, that's a good thing. Average sale price, we see, ticking up. at a pretty steady rate, right? It's not astronomical, it's not parabolic, it's just pretty much steady going back and forth. There's a normal kind of zigzag pattern each year because some months are more hot than other months naturally. Like January and February are usually the least sales. May, June, July, sometimes August are usually the most sales. And then what doesn't sell in the summer will still be on the market in September, and September is usually the highest as far as month supply of inventory or days on market and total number of active listings for whatever didn't sell, because a lot of people go on the market in the summer. Okay. Now, when we look at the line chart for the average sale price, we also start to see a little bit of a retracement in the price here. Now that 2019 has been going on, we're starting to see a little bit, and I covered this in my price housing price index video as well. Since about May, June of this year, we've started to see the housing price index starting to retrace a little bit lower. All right, it's not necessarily a bad thing. This is just basically normal housing activity, housing market activity. When we see it, if we see it tank, that's obviously, not a good thing. If we start to see things outside of the bounds of what is, to be expected or reasonable, that's when you start to say, hey, this is not normal activity, and we have a different conversation then. Now, we look at the line for median days of original list date to contract date, days on the market. We see pretty much all over the place from 2013 to 2019, but it is generally from 2013 to 2019. It's a little bit more days on market, but not a crazy amount. It's overall pretty healthy market activity. So it's a good thing for everybody here in Miami-Dade. And, this is, again, just Miami-Dade, but Miami is one of the indicator cities for the economy at large. We have a lot of cash buyers here in Miami compared to other places, which does influence it. The market does influence our market over other markets. We're the number one county for foreign-born individuals, which also affects it a lot because, again, you have the FERPTA and you have just basically you have a whole litany of factors. That would be a whole nother video to talk about the influences and effects of that. But it's another thing that makes Miami-Dade different and affects our economy differently than others. So a little asterisk on it there. But overall, pretty normal market activity, healthy market. I think that the fact that we are ranked so high in terms of the percentage of people's income that they spend on housing, I think that is going to it is going to bear itself out in like what we see. The sale price is starting to dip a little bit, right? It's normal. It's the natural ebb and flow of the market. People can't afford as much, then the prices have to come down a little bit, right? So it's natural, it's normal. I don't see anything out of, what is to be expected here. And that's a nice little thorough update and health check on the real estate and overall economy of Miami-Dade. We always are going to continue expecting to see that population growth by about 1% per year, and job growth is consistently been up. And all we need is for the cost of housing for both buying and renting to meet the economic needs of the population. And that's about it. So hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hit the like button below. Subscribe to my channel if you have not already. I'm Jake Fletcher, Fletcher Group, Remax Advance Realty in Miami, Florida. Sell smart, buy bold. I'll catch you next time.